Hello, I'm Adrian Finnegan, and this is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. This week, Israel's war on Gaza has hurt its agricultural heartlands. The nation is struggling to fill the gap left by foreign workers who fled due to the conflict. Also this week, as geopolitical tensions in the Middle East escalate, gold is becoming more and more expensive, but will oil also fire up? Plus, environmental values before paychecks. Many employees are walking out of companies that fail to commit to the fight against climate change. Food security has been at the heart of Israel's economic policy for decades, but Israeli farmers are now worried that the war on Gaza could turn their fields into barren land. Growers can't reach their crops in the area surrounding the Strip, which is known as Israel's vegetable patch, and there's a sharp shortage of Palestinian and foreign workers. With a lack of pickers, fruits and vegetables are left to rot where they grew. Many farmers fear the conflict could hurt the agricultural industry for many months to come. Well, a survey of 389 farmers conducted by the Migal Galilee Research Institute found 89% of Israeli farmers have experienced some damage, and nearly all of them expect more losses during the next 3 months. Nearly three-quarters of the farmers faced disruption to their workforce, even in areas not close to the fighting. Farmers expected a 35% drop in both production and revenue on average, but that's projected to double in areas close to the border with Gaza. Israel's agricultural industry has long relied mainly on Palestinian and Thai workers, but many Palestinians from the occupied West Bank are banned from entering Israel. Thousands of foreign workers fled when the war started, and Israeli drivers, pickers, machine operators and managers have been called up for military duty. The shortfall is estimated to be more than 30,000 workers. Farmers are looking to fill the gap with volunteers or by hiring Israelis. Sign-on bonuses are being offered to Israelis willing to work on the farms, and soldiers have been mobilized to help harvest crops. The government is trying to encourage foreign workers to go back to the fields by extending their visas and offering them extra payments of $500 a month. It's also looking to recruit thousands of laborers from countries including India and Sri Lanka. Meanwhile, the departure of hundreds of Malawians to work on Israeli farms has sparked a debate in the cash-strapped African country. Critics of the agreement are worried about safety measures put in place to protect Malawians as the war continues. That's despite attempts by officials in Malawi and Israel to assuage their fears. Human rights experts have warned foreign workers could be at risk of exploitation as Israel scrambles to fill the labour gap. Well, joining us now from London is Eyal Winter. He's the Silversweg Professor of Economics at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and a Professor of Economics at Lancaster University in the UK. Professor, good to have you with us. Before we talk about the toll that this war is taking on the agricultural sector in Israel, I want to know whether it is still a main driver of Israel's economy. How important is it to the country?
Yeah, agriculture in Israel is very important. But it's not crucial as it was, well, let's say, 30 years ago. These days, we are importing much more food produce, meat, vegetables, fruits from other countries. But the industry is very important for those who work in this industry. For those who have the farms, they rely on this for their lives, and the war is making it very, very difficult for them for two reasons. One is some farms have been evacuated because of the war, for security reasons, and the other reason is that much of the workers are foreign workers, and many of these foreign workers, not all, but many of these foreign workers went back because of the war to their home countries. Israelis citizens now, it's quite an amazing phenomenon. People from age of 13 to 90 volunteer to, I will do it myself a few weeks, in the next few weeks, to work in the fields to replace those foreign workers. Okay. But this is not enough.
Professor, I'm sorry to interrupt
Yeah.
you, but time is tight here. You say that Israel is now more reliant upon imports. I mean, there is a cost to that, surely. I mean, it's more expensive to import food than it is to grow your own, isn't it? I mean, what is that having a drag on the economy?
Not really. I mean, surprisingly, the produce that are made in Israel are more expensive because of the labor costs. Israel imports from country with prices are much lower, and you may be surprised by vegetables and fruits that are on the market that are from Israeli produce are more expensive. But now the situation, especially for those who work on the agriculture, is difficult. But I think when the war ends, things will recover quite quickly. When we're talking about agriculture, there's one more thing that needs to be said here in relation to the war. Israel is one of the leading countries in the production of technology, agricultural technology. And when I think about it, I mean, the potential of Israel helping Gaza, okay, in boosting its agriculture industry is amazing. I mean, this potential has been put aside for so many years, okay? And my real hope is when this war ends, that I believe that Israel is helping in agriculture many undeveloped countries. I mean, much of its technology is being exported, and experts are going to other countries to teach people how to use these technologies. And it's so frustrating to see that it doesn't take place near home, okay? And it doesn't take near homes because what happens now, and hopefully soon, this will be gone. And my hope is that Israel will be able to help in the agriculture. Gaza needs agriculture, a flourishing agriculture industry, and that I hope that Israel will be able to assist it.
We talked about Israel's reliance on foreign workers for its agricultural sector. Rights groups have criticized the working conditions that they experienced. That was before the war began. Now they're warning that they're at risk of exploitation. What do you make of those criticisms?
No, I think this won't happen. I think Israel have a very strict rules about dealing and treating of foreign workers. They're very liberal. They're very social. These rules are going to be kept. And I tell you something else on the psychology level. People in Israel are so appreciative to those workers who decided not to go home, but to stay with Israel, to help in the agriculture. And they did it to some extent, not for money, but for solidarity. And it just makes no sense to treat these workers badly when they did something so nice and so supportive to Israel. So I doubt that this will happen.
You talked, Professor, about people volunteering to work in the agriculture sector, but there's a shortfall of what? 30,000 workers, among them the Palestinians who are now banned from entering Israel. I mean, can that number be made up?
It cannot replace the labor force that Israel had before the war. Absolutely, it's more a gesture made by the citizen. It helps somewhat, but not. It cannot bring back the situation to what it was before. And therefore, that's why the sector is in a slowdown. But as I said, I mean, at the moment the war is over, these workers will come back to Israel, and the sector will revive itself very quickly.
Professor, many thanks indeed for being with us on Counting the Cost. Now, Israel's siege, relentless bombing and ground operations have upended all manner of life in Gaza. Human Rights Watch released video of satellite imagery showing the destruction of orchards, greenhouses and farmland in the northern part of the Strip. It says the damage compounds concerns about food insecurity and lost livelihoods. Israel has cut off food, water and fuel supplies to the already besieged Strip since the beginning of the war. Aid deliveries are limited and the humanitarian situation is catastrophic. To know more about this, do watch our previous editions of Counting the Cost, where we detail the crippling cost of the war for Gaza and its residents. Now, when geopolitical tensions rise, investors tend to put their money into safe havens like gold. The yellow metal is looking hot right now as the war on Gaza escalates, but the cost of oil is also sensitive to events in the Middle East. Yet, after an attack on an American warship and commercial vessels in the southern Red Sea, it's changed very little in value. Prices could go up, though, if the war widens across the region and disrupts supplies. Oil prices have swung wildly in recent months despite attempts by major producers to shore up the market. They've recently agreed once again to deepen voluntary cuts to output for the first quarter of 2024. The total curbs amount to more than 2 million barrels per day, including a rolling over of previous cuts by Saudi Arabia and Russia. OPEC Plus has also invited Brazil to join the group, but countries struggling with a high cost of living, like the US, want to ease prices. The nation's pumped a record 13 million barrels a day into the market. Now, Brent crude, the international benchmark, rallied after OPEC Plus cuts were announced, but then lost more than 2%, trading near $80 a barrel last week. That's well below a year high of almost $96 a barrel in September. Prices were expected to surpass $100 a barrel in the past 2 months, but despite output reductions by oil producers, they've whipsawed in the 70s. Oil prices hit more than $120 a barrel last year after Russia invaded Ukraine. The International Monetary Fund says that Saudi Arabia needs to earn nearly $86 a barrel to fund an ambitious overhaul of its economy. From Dubai, we're joined now by Jamil Ahmad. Jamil is Chief Market Analyst at Global Trading and Brokerage Corporation. Good to have you with us, Jamil. So, we've got a war in the Middle East, and yet oil prices have hardly moved. What's going on?
It's exactly that, Adrian. Essentially, look, after the terrible events that started on October 7th, we did have an initial $9 to $10 spike in the oil price over the next trading week or so. But since then, we've now dropped more than $20, and we're now heading towards below $70, which is the lowest level since early July. And that's a few different reasons for this. Firstly, no matter how difficult and tragic these events are taking place, it is not in an area of high economic activity, nor in an area of high exports. So we compare the 2023 crisis, which has taken place now, against the 2022 events of Russia and Ukraine, is completely different. So we can't say it's apple for apple. Nonetheless, another factor is that institutional and asset managers have always been on the side of the coin that no new entrant or new theme to the conflict will be getting involved, creating more of a supply issue. And more than 1 month on, that call has very much proved correct, because we have dropped as much as $20 since that impact following the events on October 7th.
Now, OPEC Plus has repeatedly cut production, as we said. Another voluntary reduction announced last week, and yet markets have hardly budged on that news either. Why?
OPEC and OPEC Plus, it sounds very good on headline, but typically it's always been seen as a dysfunctional group with a lack of unity and a lack of compliance. I'll give you a couple of different examples of this. Following the OPEC Plus meeting, which firstly was postponed abruptly, and then it was rescheduled just a couple of days later, the announcement was that, yes, we were going to extend the production cuts, but all individual members who comply with this will be announcing their statements, their figures separately. This automatically results in even more signs of a lack of unity, a lack of a clear message. And essentially, yes, OPEC and OPEC Plus do control as much as 90% of oil reserves and 60% of oil production. But until you get those clear, consistent and standardized messages from the group, financial markets do not see it as something that we can typically always believe, because again, the lack of compliance is there for us to see. If we also had some other standardization where all different members have different price points for exports, for government revenues, and so forth. So basically, we have a number of different conflicts of interest taking place as well, which is why despite OPEC Plus having such a huge market share, its longer-term impact on financial market and oil price specifically in this example is not that much material unless we do have consistent messages provided from the group.
And how significant is Brazil being invited to join OPEC Plus?
It's significant from headline. Brazil is one of the top 10 producers of the commodity. It's also a large importer of the commodity as well. But again, I'll give you some of the historical context here. OPEC was seen as initially 13 different members. The establishment of OPEC Plus added a further 11 members to that group. And now Brazil, if it becomes a member and not an observer, which again is not clear at this stage, would make it 12. But until we see that unity, the consistency, and that all members have equal votes, equal distribution, and they have equal interests at heart, it will not mean that much over the longer term.
There are concerns, Jamil, over slower demand from China. How much of a problem for OPEC Plus is production in the US, which is ramping up?
It was the initial concern. If we look back towards the oil price crash that started roughly 10 years ago, that was the major reason why. It was that US was set to take up more of the storm. It was set to become the world's largest producer and exporter of the commodity, which in fact 2022 data from the Energy Information Agency actually proved that was going to be the case. And again, we do have concerns as well about slowing global economic growth. You pointed out China, which is the major importer of the commodity. But as we head into 2024, we still have a number of different global economic health issues. Firstly, uncertain central bank policy and inflation projections, which are all weighing on global economic growth. We have also not yet seen the true impact of the sharpest shift higher in interest rate policy that many of us have seen in a generation. Until we get the signals, and we are starting to see the indications that global central banks in the developed world, the US Federal Reserve, which of course controls US interest rate policy, European Central Bank in Europe, the Bank of England for the UK and so forth. Until we start getting the signals coming through that they're really going to start cutting interest rates into 2024, we do see more concerns prevailing about global economic growth, which is why supply and demand is still an issue.
All right, Jamil, stay with us. Thanks for that. But I want to talk to you about gold, which we'll turn our attention to now. As you can see, the precious metal jumped in price by more than 3% on December 4th. To a record of more than $2,135 an ounce before pairing some of those gains. That's more than the previous all-time high it set in August 2020 when the coronavirus pandemic boosted safe haven demand. Gold prices have risen by more than 10% so far this year. So, Jamil, gold never has been this expensive. Is it just about current geopolitical tension, or is there something else going on here?
We have a number of different uncertainties in the world. Geopolitical tensions on multiple fronts, global economic health concerns, how developed and emerging economies are handling the high interest rate policy. And we do see reasons why gold still remains in demand, even though it has fallen from that $2,100 record high just a few days ago. It's still above $2,000 US. And we also see signals that the central banks are hoarding gold. We see the largest increases in gold allocations for roughly 70 years. And I do think it comes down to global economic health concerns, uncertainty as to where the world is heading, and then other economic projections as well, central bank policy and supply and demand, how economies are going to continue to handle high interest rates. We still have a number of complexities, which is why as a safe haven, gold still remains as an investor's best friend.
All right, Jamil, so that's gold. Let's turn our attention now to Bitcoin, which has surged to its highest price in nearly 20 months. The world's largest cryptocurrency has surpassed $44,000, marking a 150% increase this year. The value of the digital coin has plunged to as low as $17,000 after a series of interest rate hikes by the US Federal Reserve. The collapse of FTX, one of the biggest crypto companies, has also pushed the price down. So, Jamil, is Bitcoin making a comeback?
It very much appears to be the case. It's the early Christmas present and somewhat of a Santa ready. If we look back on what Bitcoin was priced at 1 year ago, it was $16,000 US. So we're now approaching close to 3 times that value just 1 year later. Nonetheless, we've passed some psychological resistance levels, $30,000, $35,000, and $40,000 earlier this week. As you see, traders and investors are very quick to price in further gains. We need to see if we can hold on to that $45,000 US dollar handle. I do think that the momentum's looking somewhat exhausted because we've had a huge move over just a couple of trading weeks. But there are signs of cryptocurrencies being more widely adopted There are expectations that an exchange-traded fund will be presented and created by one of the leading asset managers, which does suggest from a fixed income and different investor level that a much more sophisticated and seasoned investor will be able to invest in cryptocurrencies, which is why Bitcoin is really in the fever right now.
Jamil, many thanks indeed for being with us on Counting the Cost. Really good to talk to you. Now, one of the main attractions of a job is usually how much an employee is paid, but a growing number of workers are now prioritising environmental goals over salaries. So-called climate quitters are ready to turn down a recruitment offer or resign if their employer doesn't commit to climate action. The trend is particularly growing in the UK, where consulting company KPMG has recently conducted a survey of 6,000 people. It found that environmental, social and governance, or ESG factors, are influencing employment decisions for almost half of British office workers. The study says that millennials and young workers are driving the climate quitting trend, seeking out a more environmentally friendly job. 20% of respondents have turned down job offers if the company didn't demonstrate climate and social commitments, while 51% of 2,000 students surveyed globally by the Yale School of Management said that they would accept lower salaries to work for an environmentally responsible company. The International Energy Agency says that more people were employed by clean energy companies than by fossil fuel ones this year. Let's get back to Dubai. From there, we're joined by John Malli, Head of Global Environmental, Social and Governance at KPMG International. Good to have you with us, John. Apart from being environmentally conscious, what is it that's motivating these employees to quit or not accept a job in the first place? And are they mostly younger workers?
Our research shows that almost half of the UK workers of what I'll be clear in saying, all ages are basing their employment decisions on environmental, but also social considerations. Now, this is particularly true among millennial and Gen Z employees, where the figure rises to more than half. But I just want to be really clear in stating that this is not it is not just about climate. For example, for Gen Z, a whopping 92% of them place an importance of being able to link their own values and their own purpose with that of the organizations that they work for. Young professionals want to work for, and indeed they want to achieve goals which go beyond profit alone. Now, interestingly, what we've seen in our research that younger workers, say between 18 and 34, most of them, they're primarily interested in fair pay commitments, whilst the next bracket up, those between 35 and 44, they are most focused on environmental impact of the company's work that they do. And there are other considerations, such as broader ethical considerations, also taken, we've seen through the data. I would just clarify very quickly that our data shows the key factors guiding where employees choose to work today and indeed in the future, with 20% of adults and 30% of the 18 to 24 brackets turning down job offers, as you've mentioned.
Is this phenomenon affecting companies in that it's forcing them in a way to change their environmental policies? And are there any particular sectors that are being affected more than others?
Yeah, yes, indeed. There's a strong sector-related data that we see coming through. So for climate, for example, this resonates more in what we call the hard-to-abate sectors. So herein we see at 24% said that they would not work in mining, 23% would not work in oil and gas, and 21% would not work in petrochemicals. But this is not just about climate. I said it before, I'll say it again. The two most common sectors in which respondents said they would not work in are much more social and health focused. So, for example, 24% said they would not work in the alcohol sector, and we see that 42% said they would not work in the tobacco sector.
And, John, as we transition towards more renewable energy supplies, I mean, could that transform the job market?
Yes, indeed, absolutely. So as we transition, what we see is emerging technologies, emerging areas. So you talked about renewable energy, onshore wind, offshore wind, technologies around this, such as carbon capture, carbon storage, and so on. All of these will lead to new jobs, a new set of skills, and we absolutely see young people coming through who are passionate about this agenda, wanting to work in these areas, and we absolutely see that transforming the jobs market in the future.
John, it's been really good to talk to you on Counting the Cost. Many thanks indeed for being with us. And that's our show for this week. If you'd like to comment on anything that you've seen, you can get in touch with us by tweeting me on X. That still sounds awkward. I'm at A Finnegan on X. Try to remember to use the hashtag AJCTC when you do. Or you could drop us a line. countingthecost@aljazeera.net is our email address. As always, there's plenty more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC. That takes you straight to our page, and there you'll find individual reports, links, and entire episodes for you to catch up on. But that's it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Adrian Finnegan from the team here in Doha. Thanks for being with us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.